Finally, my raise is coming. I said it out loud, maybe too proudly, as I set my portfolio on the table during the promotion meeting. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from a quiet confidence. I had worked harder than anyone else in that room, and everyone knew it. Across from me, my husband, the boss, lifted his eyes from his phone for the first time that morning. Instead of pride or support, his face carried something else. A smirk. A glimmer of amusement, like I'd just told a bad joke. Raise? His voice cut through the conference room's sterile air. No, darling. Already gave it to Kelly. The words didn't register at first. The fluorescent lights above hummed too loudly, and my grip on the portfolio tightened. I waited for him to laugh again, to say he was joking, but he didn't. Kelly leaned back in her chair, lips painted red, eyes sparkling with victory. Oops, she said with the kind of sweetness that makes your stomach turn. Forgot to tell you. Forgot to tell me. Bethany from HR, sitting stiffly at the far end of the table, cleared her throat. Her hand slid a folder across the polished mahogany surface with clinical detachment. Michelle, you weren't even on the list this quarter. The decision was finalized last week. The folder tapped twice against the table as Bethany withdrew her hand, her expression neutral but her eyes full of pity. Around us, the room had grown painfully silent. Some stared down at their papers, pretending not to notice. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unwilling to meet my eyes. My husband leaned back, folding his arms, the smirk never leaving his face. And Kelly? She crossed her legs slowly, her new heels catching the light. The same pair she'd once asked my opinion on in the restroom, giggling like we were friends. My chest tightened. Not from the loss of a raise. Not even from the humiliation of being blindsided in front of colleagues I'd led through crisis after crisis. Number. It was the betrayal. The deep, bone-level betrayal of realizing the man who shared my bed had spent weeks training my replacement while encouraging me to rehearse a pitch he knew would never matter. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said the only thing I could. I see. Well, then I'll need the afternoon to transition my projects. Kelly smirked. That won't be necessary. Jasper's already been bringing me up to speed. My husband nodded. Exactly. Kelly's ready to take over. The word ready burned in my ears. Ready? She'd been in the department for less than a year. She'd never handled a client meltdown, never worked overnight through a campaign crisis, never spent weekends salvaging accounts while the rest of the team was home with their families. Ready was the last thing she was. I stood, portfolio still clutched against my chest, and walked out without another word. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing like a gavel. In my cubicle, a small corner desk piled with reminders of years of dedication, I began pulling my things into a box. The orchid I'd nurtured through 2 winters, the mug from Emma, my daughter, that said "World's Best Multitasker." The framed photo from the company retreat, where I'd been named Employee of the Quarter for the 3rd consecutive time. Timothy, one of my junior associates, appeared at my desk, panic written all over his face. Michelle, the Baxter account needs final approval before it goes to print. If you don't sign off, give it to Kelly. My voice was sharper than I intended. But she doesn't even know the Baxter team. She's never met them. You've been working with them for months, I paused, looking at him. 24, bright-eyed, still naive enough to believe hard work guaranteed recognition. I almost envied him. Then I guess she'll learn quickly. The words tasted bitter, but I forced myself to keep packing. The silence stretched between us until he finally walked away. The drive home was 18 minutes. I counted every traffic light, every mile that took me farther from that building where I had given everything and received nothing. Our house, tucked neatly on a tree-lined street in Portland, looked the same as always. But as I carried the box of my belongings inside, it felt different. Colder. On Jasper's desk, left slightly ajar, sat the Campbell contract, the one I had bled for, strategized for, saved at the very last minute. Its margins were covered in notes, but not in Jasper's sharp handwriting. No, these loops and curves were Kelly's. 6 weeks of notes. 6 weeks of strategy stolen directly from me. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma, away at college. "How did the big meeting go, Mom? Did you get it?" My throat closed. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not while the promises we'd made about tuition, about her dreams, still echoed in my mind. I looked back at the contract on Jasper's desk. Kelly's notes. My stolen work. My stolen future. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. While Jasper thought he'd denied me a raise, what he'd actually done was light a fuse that was already burning. And nobody, neither Jasper nor Kelly, had any idea what was coming next. The box from my office sat untouched on the dining table, its contents a silent reminder of everything I had built and lost in a single morning. I should have been crying, screaming, maybe even begging Jasper for an explanation. Instead, I sat perfectly still, staring at the Campbell contract covered in Kelly's handwriting. 6 weeks of strategy notes. 6 weeks of meetings, plans, and details that were supposed to be mine. The betrayal wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. My husband had let another woman pick apart my work in the margins of our life, in our home, in the very space where Emma used to do her homework after school. The silence pressed against my ears, louder than any argument we'd ever had. At 6:42 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of Jasper's keys hitting the ceramic bowl in the entryway, right on schedule. His footsteps moved across the hardwood, pausing in the dining room. "You're home early," he said, noticing the box. His tone wasn't surprise. It was annoyance, as if I'd disrupted some plan of his. I didn't look up from the contract. Meeting went shorter than expected. He walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie, opened the fridge. The sound of a beer cap popping against the counter made me flinch. I had asked him 100 times not to do that. It scratched the granite. He never listened. "So, what's for dinner?" he asked casually, like the day hadn't detonated my entire career. I set the contract down carefully. "We need to talk about today. Michelle." He sighed, the way people sigh when they're tired of repeating themselves. "We've been through this. Promoting my wife would look bad. The board has concerns. Kelly was the right choice." I stared at him. "The board has concerns? Or you do?" "Both," he snapped, finally meeting my eyes. "You can't separate personal from professional. You get too emotionally invested in your work. Kelly has perspective. I almost laughed. Kelly, who once asked me what ROI stood for in the middle of a client meeting. Kelly, who leaned on me for every decision, every draft, every deadline. "You mean she has you feeding her my work?" I said quietly. He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. He just sipped his beer and looked out the window like the conversation bored him. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. For the first time in 12 years, I saw Jasper not as my husband, but as an obstacle. A man who had carefully orchestrated my professional execution, all while smiling across the dinner table, nodding encouragingly as I rehearsed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood and walked upstairs, leaving him in the kitchen. In our bedroom, I pulled out the suitcase from our honeymoon. The luggage tag from Maui still clung to the handle, faded but legible. Paradise found. I almost laughed at the irony. I laid the suitcase on the bed and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys, heart pounding. Every instinct told me to slam the lid shut, crawl into bed, and let exhaustion win. But then my phone buzzed. A text from Timothy. "Hazelton Hotels is panicking. Kelly told them you quit without notice. They want reassurance. Should I connect them with you?" I typed back quickly, then deleted my words. Not my problem anymore. Too harsh. Timothy didn't deserve my bitterness. Instead, I wrote, "Hold steady. I'll be in touch soon, but not tonight." Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, "The list." And then I began writing down everything they didn't even know existed. Passwords to internal systems I'd built. Client contacts I'd nurtured personally, many who trusted me more than the company. Campaign frameworks that existed only on my laptop. Notes from meetings Jasper never attended. The cursor blinked at the end of each line like a heartbeat. The more I typed, the calmer I felt. This wasn't desperation. It was control. By midnight, the list had grown to 3 pages. I saved it, encrypted it, and backed it up on a flash drive I tucked into my purse. At 12:03, Jasper came upstairs. He paused at the doorway, looking at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. "Michelle, don't be dramatic," he said tiredly. "It's just a job." I looked up at him, my hands folded neatly on the laptop. "You're right. It's just a job. And this?" I gestured at the suitcase. "Just a marriage where my husband humiliated me in front of my colleagues and handed my work to someone else. Nothing dramatic about that." He opened his mouth to respond, but I closed the laptop with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. "I'll stay at Margaret's for a few days," I said, standing. "Give us both space to think." Jasper's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. For once, silence was on my side. As I zipped the suitcase shut, a strange calm washed over me. He thought he'd ended my career today. He thought I'd just disappear quietly, like another discarded employee. But Jasper had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just his wife. I was the woman who built that company from the shadows. And now, I was the woman who held the match. The fuse wasn't just lit. It was burning faster than he could imagine. And by the time it reached the end, Jasper and Kelly wouldn't even see it coming. Margaret's guest room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. It wasn't home, but it was quiet, and that was enough. I sat at her desk with my laptop open, the glow of the screen illuminating the clock. 5:47 a.m. Sleep had been impossible. Instead of tossing in bed, I started digging. First stop, my work email. I had less than an hour before they revoked my access, and I wasn't going to waste it. I began forwarding everything important to a secure folder. Contracts, client correspondence, campaign drafts with my digital signature on them. At 6:02, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. An email from Jasper to Bethany in HR, dated 3 weeks earlier. "Make sure Michelle isn't on the short list. We need someone fresh, someone less emotional. Kelly has potential. She'll be the face of the department going forward 3 weeks ago." While I'd been rehearsing my presentation every night, while Jasper sat across from me at dinner, nodding, pretending to listen, he'd already decided. I almost slammed the laptop shut. Instead, I forwarded the email to my encrypted folder and kept scrolling. Another message caught my eye. Jasper to Kelly, marked confidential. "Michelle is too invested in her projects. She doesn't see the bigger picture. Keep building on her strategies. I'll help you polish them for the board." I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. There it was. Proof that my own husband had been coaching her with my work. The clock struck 6:30. My access was cut. The screen went black. But I had what I needed. Dozens of files, contracts, and those 2 damning emails. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and stared out Margaret's window at the gray Portland sky. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. The betrayal was real. By mid-morning, I was back in the city, meeting Timothy at a cafe near the office. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder like we were in some kind of spy movie. But when he spoke, his voice shook with anger. "Michelle, something's wrong." Hazelton Hotels called me this morning. They're threatening to pull the contract. Kelly told them you abandoned your role, that you walked out. My stomach tightened. "She's already rewriting the story." "She's drowning," Timothy said, lowering his voice. "She doesn't know the accounts. She doesn't even know the software we use to track campaigns. She's making mistakes left and right, and Jasper's covering for her." The words should have comforted me, but they didn't. I'd lived through enough crises to know mistakes could be spun, rewritten, buried under layers of corporate excuses. But what Kelly couldn't fake was competence. And clients didn't tolerate incompetence for long. "Timothy," I said carefully, "do you trust me?" He nodded without hesitation. "Then keep your head down. Do your job, nothing extra. And if Kelly asks you to do something that feels wrong, document it. Screenshots, notes, anything." He swallowed hard but nodded again. When I left the cafe, the drizzle had turned to steady rain. I pulled my coat tighter and walked without thinking, my mind replaying Jasper's words. Too emotional. Doesn't see the bigger picture. I'd heard variations of that all my life. Too sensitive. Too driven. Too demanding. But wasn't that what made me good at my job? I saw details no one else saw. I cared enough to fight for clients who were ready to walk. I worked until midnight because I knew results mattered more than excuses. And now those very qualities were being twisted into flaws. Ammunition used against me. By the time I reached Margaret's again, my determination had sharpened into something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. I spread my papers across her dining table, just as I had with client projects countless times before. 3 distinct piles began to take shape. The first, proof of ownership. Campaign drafts with my metadata. Presentation decks I'd created, each version stamped with timestamps. Notes in my handwriting from strategy meetings. The second, client records. Messages thanking me for saving contracts, praising my work, acknowledging my role directly. No amount of spin could erase that. And the third, inconsistencies. Receipts that didn't line up. Reports Kelly had submitted using templates I'd built. Expense reimbursements that smelled wrong. Conference trips she hadn't attended. Dinners with clients she never met. The more I sorted, the more the picture became clear. Jasper hadn't just overlooked me. He had actively cleared a path for Kelly, greasing the wheels with company money and rewriting history with her name. By the time Margaret returned from work, the dining table looked like a war map. She stopped in the doorway, eyes widening. "Michelle, what is all this?" "Evidence," I said simply. She set down her bag, walked closer, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, what are you planning to do?" I looked up at her, my pulse steady, my voice calm. "They think I'm gone. They think I'll disappear quietly. But I'm not going anywhere, Margaret. I built that department. I kept it alive. And now I'm going to show everyone what really happened." Margaret's brows furrowed. "And Jasper?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "He wanted me silent. Instead, I'm going to be louder than ever." The rain tapped against the window in steady rhythm, like a drumbeat. The fuse was still burning. And with every piece of evidence I gathered, the explosion drew closer. The stack of papers on Margaret's dining table had grown into a fortress. Every note, every email, every receipt painted the same picture. I hadn't just been overlooked. I'd been erased. And if Jasper thought I would sit quietly while Kelly paraded my work as her own, he didn't know me at all. The question wasn't if I'd act. It was how. I didn't want revenge that burned everything down in a blaze of chaos. Number. What I wanted was control. Clean, undeniable, professional. I wanted truth to be the thing that destroyed them, not anger. The first step was simple. Reach out to the people who mattered most. The clients. I opened my laptop and drafted a short, precise message. Not emotional, not bitter. Just facts. "This is Michelle. I've recently stepped away from the company. I want to personally thank you for your trust over the years and ensure a smooth transition. Should you have concerns or unresolved matters regarding ongoing projects, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. Wishing you continued success. No accusations, no drama, just an open door." By the next morning, my inbox was overflowing. Messages poured in from Hazelton Hotels, Finch and Rowe Marketing, even the smaller startups I'd championed when no one else bothered. The theme was the same. Confusion, panic, and above all, frustration. One client wrote, Michelle, why didn't you tell us you were leaving? Kelly hasn't responded to our calls in 3 days. The campaign is falling apart. Another said, "You're the reason we stayed with the company after last year's mess. If you're gone, we'll need to reconsider our options." Each email was a spark, and together they were building into a fire. At 9:14 a.m., my phone buzzed, a number I recognized. Hazelton's VP of Marketing. "Michelle," he said, skipping any greeting. "Is it true? You're no longer with the firm?" I chose my words carefully. "That's correct. The decision wasn't mine, but I respect it." He exhaled sharply. "We don't." "Look, Kelly doesn't know what she's doing. Jasper keeps deflecting, but deadlines don't care about excuses. If you're available, we'd rather work directly with you." Independently, my pulse quickened. Independently. I forced calm into my voice. "That's something I'd be open to discussing." And just like that, the first domino tipped. By noon, 3 more clients had called. By evening, I had a list of potential contracts large enough to rival the very department Jasper had handed to Kelly. Margaret watched me scribble numbers across her notepad, eyebrows raised. "You're building your own firm," she said. "Not yet," I corrected. "But I'm showing them I exist without Jasper. That their loyalty was always to me, not the company name on the letterhead." She smiled faintly. "He's going to notice." I leaned back in the chair, exhaustion pressing into my bones, but beneath it all was a steady pulse of determination. Good. Because I wanted him to notice. 2 days later, he did. It started with a message on my phone. "Jasper. Short. Clipped. No hello. Clients are calling asking for you." "You're confusing them." "Stop, I didn't respond." An hour later, another text. "We need to talk. Kelly is under pressure. This is affecting the board." I set the phone face down and kept working. That evening, as I was sorting through more files, Margaret appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Michelle, he's here." My stomach tightened. I walked to the front hall, and there he was. Jasper, standing in his immaculate suit, but for the first time, he didn't look composed. His tie was loose, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "Michelle," he said, lowering his voice as though Margaret weren't in the next room. "You're undermining everything. Clients are threatening to leave. Do you have any idea what you're doing?" I held his gaze. "Yes, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm reminding them who built their campaigns, who saved their accounts, who they trusted." His jaw tightened. "You're going to ruin us." "No, Jasper," I said softly. "You ruined us the moment you humiliated me in that meeting. I'm just making sure the truth surfaces." For a moment, I thought he'd argue. Instead, he dropped his eyes, exhaled, and muttered, "You're being emotional again." That word. Emotional. He wielded it like a weapon, as if it stripped me of logic, of professionalism, of credibility. But I didn't take the bait. I stepped closer, lowered my voice until he had to lean in to hear me. Clients don't want emotionless robots. They want someone who cares enough to fight for them. That was me. It was never Kelly. He flinched, just slightly. A crack in the armor. Then he straightened, forcing composure back into his voice. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said. "It isn't." He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a long moment, my reflection faint in the glass, the rain streaking down the porch light. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was no longer just about a raise, no longer just about humiliation in a conference room. This was about rebuilding on my terms, proving that the empire Jasper and Kelly thought they controlled was never theirs to begin with. And now, with every client call, with every email, with every piece of evidence piled high on Margaret's dining table, the balance was shifting. The fuse was nearly at its end. And when it finally reached the powder, I wouldn't be the one left in the rubble. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the cracks to spread into fractures, and the fractures into collapse. At first, it was whispers, clients threatening to walk, projects delayed, deadlines missed, but whispers don't stay quiet in business. By the end of the first week, the board had convened an emergency meeting. Timothy called me that Friday evening, his voice hushed, like he was reporting from behind enemy lines. "Michelle, it's bad." Hazelton pulled their account. Finch and Rowe put everything on pause. The board demanded answers, and Jasper blamed Kelly. Kelly broke down crying in front of them. I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, my laptop open, contracts spread around me, a fresh mug of coffee steaming in my hand. For the first time in years, I felt steady. "And what did the board say?" I asked. "They told Jasper they're losing confidence in his leadership." I let the silence hang for a moment, listening to the rain tap against the window. Losing confidence. The very words Jasper had once whispered about me. Now they were aimed at him. By the second week, the dam broke. Hazelton officially signed with me. 2 more clients followed. I hadn't even advertised my services. I didn't need to. Word spread quickly. Michelle wasn't gone. She was independent, and she delivered. That Monday morning, as I was finalizing Hazelton's new campaign timeline, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Bethany from HR. I hesitated before answering. Her voice was taut. "Michelle, I shouldn't be saying this, but you need to know. The board is investigating Jasper. They found emails, expense reports. They're realizing he's been covering for Kelly, funneling resources to her, even approving reimbursements for trips she never took." I leaned back in my chair. So the truth is finally surfacing. Bethany's sigh crackled through the line. "Michelle, you should have been in his chair. Everyone sees it now. I didn't respond right away. The younger version of me, the one who once believed loyalty would be rewarded, would have jumped at that validation. But now, I didn't need their chair. I had built my own table." That night, Jasper showed up at Margaret's door again. He looked worse than before. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his confidence cracked wide open. "Michelle," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "You have to stop. You're destroying me." I studied him, the man I had once built a life with, the man who had smiled across a dinner table while plotting my professional execution. And all I felt was distance. "I didn't destroy you, Jasper. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering your tracks." His jaw worked as if he wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. Finally, he whispered, "I made a mistake." The words hung in the air between us. Too little, too late. I closed the door gently. The following week, Jasper resigned. Kelly was quietly removed. No announcement, no fanfare. Just silence where their names had once been spoken. And me? I signed my 3rd client contract as an independent consultant. No corporate politics. No glass ceiling built by the very man I'd once trusted. Just me, my work, and the clients who valued it. The first time I deposited my earnings into a new business account, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. It wasn't just about money. It was about ownership. Control. Emma called one evening between classes, her voice bright. "Mom, everyone's talking about you. You're trending on LinkedIn. People are saying you're proof that walking away doesn't mean giving up." Her pride meant more than any promotion ever could. I thought back to that conference room weeks ago. The fluorescent lights, the pitying glances, Kelly's smirk, Jasper's cruel laugh. I had walked out humiliated, but humiliation had turned into fuel. And now, I wasn't the woman erased from a promotion list. I wasn't the wife discarded in favor of someone newer, shinier, easier to control. I was Michelle, independent, respected, untouchable. The fuse Jasper lit had burned all the way to the end. And when the explosion came, it didn't just shatter his world. It cleared a path for mine. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple. Betrayal doesn't end you. It reveals you. It forces you to see who you really are when everything you thought was secure is stripped away. Sometimes the door you're shoved out of is the very one that leads you to freedom. And as I closed my laptop that night, contract signed, future wide open, I smiled for the first time in a long time. Because I wasn't looking back anymore.